Good afternoon and welcome to the Easter Seals Project Action Webinar, Frequently Asked Questions on the ADA, Fixed Route and ADA Complementary Paratransit. All participants will be in a listen-only mode. There will be an opportunity to ask questions during today's presentation. At that time, an operator will give instructions on how to ask your questions. If you should need assistance during the conference, please signal an operator by pressing the star then 0 on your touch-tone phone. Please, this conference is being recorded. I would like to turn the conference over to Christian Braco.
Thank you so much. Welcome everybody to today's session. We're going to be addressing some of the most common and interesting questions that we have received recently here at Easter Seals Project Action around the ADA and what it means to the provision of public transportation services. Our whole team is here today, ready to start us off by answering a set of questions that represent some of the best that we've received recently, the best and most interesting. Following our prepared remarks, we're going to have some time for opening up the phone lines and the chat window for any questions that we may not have answered. Before we begin the session, I'd like to just get a few quick housekeeping things out of the way. The PowerPoint presentation for today's session can be found on the event website, which you can get to by visiting www.projectaction.org, clicking on Training and Webinars, and then you'll find the page for today's session. And we'll also put the link to that in the chat momentarily. This event is also being recorded and transcribed. You can visit our website, projectaction.org, in about 30 days, and you'll be able to download a written copy of the transcript. To receive a copy in Braille or audio CD formats, please email that request to webinars@easterseals.com, and please provide us with your name and postal address, and we'll be happy to send that along. Also, closed captioning is available for this event. To open the captioning window, please hit Control and F8. Or you can enable it by clicking on the window menu and then select Show Closed Captioning. And you can size that window to fit within your webinar screen. Before I introduce our presenters today, I just want to take a minute to share some news with you. The Federal Transit Administration is proposing guidance in the form of 4 additional circular chapters to help transportation providers meet the requirements of the U.S. Department of Transportation's Americans with Disabilities Act regulations. These proposed chapters include a chapter on the beginning, sort of the introduction and applicability, another chapter on general requirements, another circular chapter on equivalent facilitation, and finally one on complementary paratransit service. Along with the proposed chapter on vehicle acquisition that was published on October 2nd, 2012, these chapters are part of a series of approximately 12 chapters altogether that will comprise the complete ADA circular. FTA published the notice in the Federal Register on February 19th, that was very recently, and is seeking public comment on those proposed circular chapters and any suggestions that the public may have on future chapters for other access-related issues. So we have a notice link posted on the webinar screen, and I will also place one in the chat window momentarily. I want to start today's session by introducing our speakers. We have our training team from Easter Seals Project Action here in the room. We have Donna Smith, who is our Director of Training, Julie Rosecrans, a Training and Technical Assistance Specialist, Ken Thompson, our Technical Assistance Coordinator, and myself, Christian Braco, also a Training and TA Specialist. I'd like to take a moment to remind everyone before we get started that Easter Seals Project Action is a technical assistance center that strives to provide accurate information on the ADA. What we provide is technical assistance and not legal advice. In other words, it does not carry the force of law. We aim to provide solutions using the ADA and occasionally other federal regulations as a baseline. With that, we're going to get started. I would just like to turn the session over to our director, Donna Smith, for a moment, who has some beginning thoughts, and then Ken will take it away with our first questions.
All right, thank you, Christian, and thanks to all of you for being a part of the session. We want to take just a few minutes maybe 2, to kind of get your head in the right place for the things that we're about to talk about. So I know that, when you join webinars, you're often multitasking, so I'm going to ask you to stop eating your lunch for just a minute, or don't check your email for just a minute, don't straighten out the desk drawer in front of you, whatever those little things are that we all do sometimes when we're on webinars. I want you to just stop that for a minute, sit back, close your eyes if that helps you focus, and I want you to think a minute about where you are and where it is that you have to go next. So, for instance, you may be in your office, and the next trip that you have to take is just going straight home from work. Or it may be that you have to go to the school and pick up your children in a little while. Or maybe you're going to leave work and go to the grocery store. Or maybe you're at home right now and you're going to have to go out in a little while and meet friends for dinner. So just think about where you are right this minute, and what's the next trip that you're going to have to make that's going to take you outside and you have to go somewhere. And then I want you to think about, let's just say that your personal vehicle is not available for this trip. It doesn't matter why. But if you normally go out and take a car, drive your own car, maybe you ride your bicycle, those things are just not available to you right now. And the only choice that you have is to go use public transportation. So you're where you are now, you know where you're going to go next, and you have to use public transit to get there. Your only choice is to either go use the fixed route bus or to take paratransit, if that's what's needed. But those are your only 2 choices. And then I want you to think for just a few more seconds about, what does that mean? What are you going to have to do? What's that trip going to look like? What does it mean to have to use your fixed route bus or your paratransit to make that next trip that you have to make? Think about that for just a minute. What would you have to do to make that trip? So kind of keep this in your mind as we go through our questions. We're going to answer a number of questions about different aspects of using public transportation. And these are questions that real people who use transportation ask us all the time. And they're real questions that come up in your work. If you're a transit provider, you get asked these questions all the time. And so as we're talking about them and providing information on what the Americans with Disabilities Act says about them, and then sometimes we'll be talking about what good practice might be to address some of these issues, think about yourself being in that place of using public transit and encountering these kinds of situations along the way. Think about what that would mean, how that would feel, what it would mean to you, how it might make it harder or easier for you to be able to go make that trip that you need to make next. So that's just a little bit of a setup for kind of to get our heads in the right place for what we're about to talk about for the next 80 minutes or so. And so I'll turn it over to Ken to start with our first question.
All right, let's get started, and we're going to begin with some questions around paratransit. And our first question is for Christian. And the question is there a maximum onboard time or maximum distance for paratransit according to the ADA? A maximum time that you can be on the vehicle or maximum distance that you can be required to travel?
Thanks, Ken. So the purpose of ADA Complementary Paratransit is to provide a trip that would be comparable to the fixed route. What that means is that there's nothing in the regulations stating a definite time that would be a maximum that you could spend on a paratransit vehicle. A good way to think about it is not to consider paratransit as a taxi service that's intended to get you from A to B in the most direct way possible. Instead, while sometimes a trip might be direct using transit, other times it may involve taking a longer route that would allow the vehicle to make some additional stops, maybe do some additional passenger pickups or drop-offs, that type of thing. So let's say you're trying to get from your home to the library. That trip might ordinarily be just a quick direct bus ride. It takes 10 or 15 minutes. Or, depending on where you live, maybe it could involve 2 transfers on the fixed route and could, say, take 45 minutes. It could go either way. And you shouldn't necessarily expect the paratransit trip to be the fastest possible transit trip either. Same way, it could take around 45 minutes, even if sort of your direct line over to that library would ordinarily take you only 15 in a private vehicle. So if that transit trip and the paratransit trip would take you 45 minutes either way, that's considered a comparable service.
Very well, and also to think about when you do these trips, the onboard time is comparable, but when you look at total trip time, you also can figure in how much time it would take someone to get to the bus stop as part of that trip time, and keep all that in mind too.
That's a great point.
All right, thank you, Christian. The next question is for Donna. What exactly does it mean to provide ADA complimentary service with regard to the fixed route service area, the schedule, and fares? Big question.
That is a big question, and this is one that we could really spend several hours just trying to get to all of the details involved here. But I'm going to just try to hit a couple of high points with regard to the service area schedule and fares. And if you want to get down into the weeds on this a little bit, please feel free to call our technical assistance line or email us, and we'll be glad to talk about it in more detail. Or you can go to the regulations, which is 49 CFR Part 37 Subpart F, which is the section that addresses ADA Complementary Paratransit. But generally speaking, comparable complementary paratransit service operates within 3/4 of a mile on either side of a fixed route service trip, a service route. So 3/4 of a mile on either side and at the end, in a radius at the end of each route. It also covers some of the smaller areas within the corridors that may fall a little bit outside the 3/4 of a mile, but they're still within the network of your fixed route. So a good way to think about this is to look at the network of fixed route that your transit agency provides in the community, and then consider that complimentary paratransit service will go 3/4 of a mile on either side of any of those routes. Plus, it'll cover all of the small areas that may fall between routes, but that are still within the network of the service area. ADA Complementary Paratransit Service also operates during the same hours of operation for your fixed route service. So if you have a fixed route service and all of the routes start at 6 a.m. and they go until 8 p.m., then the ADA Complementary Paratransit Service needs to operate during that same time frame. If something changes in the community and there's a need to extend one of those fixed routes so that its service time runs up until midnight, so everything else may stop at 8 p.m., but this one route continues to go until midnight, then paratransit service along that same route should also be extended. So it mirrors whatever in the service area and in the time schedule. It mirrors whatever the fixed route system operates. With regard to the fare, ADA Complementary Paratransit Service is allowed under the regulations to be as much as twice the total fare for making that same trip using your fixed route service. And that includes any charges that you may have with regard to transfers, or if there are any premium charges or peak time charges that may be charged on your fixed route service. So let's say again that you're going to be taking a trip between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. on your fixed route service, and that's going to cost $2.50. And if you take the same trip, though, between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m., which is often considered a peak time because that's when a lot of your commuters are riding, or between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m., which is another peak time because your commuters are coming home from work, let's say the cost of that same trip on fixed route is $4.50. So a similar trip taken on ADA Complementary Paratransit service could cost as much as $5 between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m., or it could cost as much as $9 if taken during the peak time, between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m., or 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. in the evening. So while it's not a requirement that paratransit fares are twice as much as the fixed route fare, it is allowed to be that much. And what it actually is, what the actual cost is, can be set locally. And hopefully with the input from some of the riders or your transit advisory committees to weigh in on what they think would be reasonable in terms of cost for ridership. But what the law requires, or what the law allows, is that paratransit fares can be twice the fare of the trip taken via the fixed route system. So again, this is a little bit complicated. As I'm sitting here talking about it, I'm thinking, I'm not sure I would understand someone kind of rambling through these things. It's pretty complex set of issues, and so if you do want to get more details about it, please just give us a call.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Donna. That was great information. Now I've got one for you, Ken. Every few years, my transit agency requires me to go through a recertification process to retain my paratransit eligibility. My disability does not change. Can they continue to require me to go through this process?
Well, yeah, the simple answer is yes. And right now, I think it's a real common question because we're getting a lot of people who are calling and said, I've been eligible for paratransit. I've been eligible for many years. And now the people are saying that the transit system says I have to go through recertification. They go, well, why? I'm eligible. Well, and this is a process really that a transit agency should put in place to determine who is eligible for the service. Just like anything else, people change. People with disabilities change. People's ability to use it. The system could change where at a certain point they may no longer be eligible for paratransit. And so you have to have a process in place to test and recertify people and to find out who really needs the service. And so it's very reasonable to expect that the transit system would come up with a process to determine who's eligible, and it could even mean that some people were eligible for some trips and not eligible for others, but they may change in the other direction where they may become eligible because of disabilities and other changes, that their eligibility is for all trips. So that could be determined in this process. It's a local policy as to when and how. The recommended period really is 3 to 5 years, and it's just really a good use in process to put in place to determine who's really eligible so that people who need the system would have this service that's available. Basically, you got to determine who can use your service and to look at those people from time to time.
Right. Great answer. Thanks, Ken. And now here's one for you, Julie. I plan to move outside the service area. Will I still be eligible for paratransit?
This is a great question. The short answer for this one is yes, you will be. Once somebody is eligible or found eligible for paratransit services, that person wouldn't automatically become ineligible just for moving outside of the service area. So if you don't, for example, reside within a service area, that doesn't mean that you wouldn't be considered eligible to use it. The only thing that is affected here in this example is what kind of a move would result in the pickup point. So for instance, if you move outside of the paratransit service area, your house might not be eligible for a pickup point, and wouldn't be in this case. So, but if you were able to transport yourself into the service area, perhaps through a volunteer driver program or another way of getting into the service area, you would still be eligible for that service. So, and also once you are in the service area, you're able to ride, within it. So if your origin was your doctor's office, you could take paratransit from your doctor's office to the grocery store and back to the office, and so forth. So the only thing that changes about moving outside of the service area is your pickup point. But once you're found eligible, you are still eligible for that time period.
All right, thanks, Julie. I'd like to give you one more paratransit question. The question is this: my transit agency has suggested that I could benefit from travel training services. Am I required to take them up on this?
This is another excellent question. And travel training is something that we at Project Action work a lot in. And for those of you on the line who might not be familiar with travel training, it is a service that is provided most often for people with disabilities, older adults, programs out there at human service agencies or transit agencies that are basically designed to teach people how to ride public transportation independently. So the focus is on safety and independence in transit. So to answer the question, the answer to this one is no. You don't have to take travel training. A transit agency cannot require somebody to participate in their travel training program. But many transit agencies that run paratransit services often will have a kind of a travel training program or some type of bus buddy service, and mainly in an effort to help the paratransit users transition from paratransit to fixed route. So this helps the paratransit system bring down the costs when they can transition riders from their paratransit services to fixed route service. But of course, all of us at Project Action are of the opinion that people who can benefit from travel training, it'd be a great idea to try some kind of a service, because not only does it help the transit agency in this case bring the cost down, but it's helping to give greater independence to people who are able to successfully participate in travel training. So the high demand for paratransit services is also something that many agencies have begun these programs or might have had them for many years now, but still they're out there encouraging people to try travel training. But again, in this case, it can only be a suggestion. And furthermore, when agencies are determining their paratransit eligibility, they have to consider the applicant's current skills, not what skills they think the applicant might have after going through a travel training program. So this is where it can get a little interesting, because there might be the temptation there to think about, well, if someone might be able to learn this skill, but you really do have to base your determination on someone's current skills. So this is basically why travel training cannot be a requirement, but it's just a suggestion. So if services are available, it can be a good idea to try it out. And also Project Action, Project Action has developed, and a lot of us work in this field and have the background to help people. I know Donna mentioned earlier, the ability to call us for technical assistance, and we also have developed a host of trainings. We have publications on the topic. We have in-person training events centered on learning more about this field. So you can also keep an eye on our website for any travel training related opportunities.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Julie. At this time, we're going to switch gears a little bit and discuss some questions regarding transit passengers who use wheelchairs. Ken, can you get us started out with this one?
All right.
We're a rider, and we are quite convinced that they and their chair together weigh more than 600 pounds. Are we required to provide them with a ride?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, and it's a real common question because there's been some...
Sorry to interrupt you. We just have a technical issue. Our captioner has been kicked off momentarily and is logging back in. If we could just give her a couple minutes to get back on so we could resume captioning, that'd be great. Thanks, and sorry for the interruption.
Okay, so we just wait for
Hey there. Hey. From my webinar.
Oh, sorry.
There's a closed caption. Person got kicked offline. So.
I was just going to tell you about the
I heard.
imposters. I don't even know if you can.
Oh, I know.
We had some jambalaya.
Oh, yeah.
That was going to be really good. Actually, it's really good, but it's full of raw, uncooked rice because the rice didn't cook. So I've been crock pot.
Oh, okay. Bummer. Oh, that's too bad. I don't eat pasta. Oh, thank you. That's really nice. Hey, are you here tomorrow? Because I have a volunteer.
All right, everyone. Our captioner has rejoined the session, and we are ready to continue going. Ken?
Okay, yeah, we'll get back to this question. So the system has a rider, and they're convinced that the chair and the individual weighs more than 600 pounds. Can you provide them a ride? I want to give you kind of a quick answer on this. You know, it used to be we had that 600-pound limit. A lot of people kind of took the common wheelchair definition, and they used the 600 pounds as sort of the maximum that they could provide. But the view has kind of changed now. A lot of equipment now have lifts that can handle 800 pounds or even up to 1,000 pounds. And so the vehicle lift is no longer really an issue. So the view now is that if your equipment can handle the higher weights, more than 600 pounds, 800 pounds or whatever, and that the individual can fit into the vehicle and do it safely, and that there's no real threat or danger to other people, such as blocking aisles or getting in the way or running into people, you make an effort to provide the trip for the person. And so you really want to kind of use the equipment you have and work it out so that the individual can travel based on the equipment you have. And so, you know, this change in the language basically just makes you think about what your equipment that you have capacity-wise, and then go with that to provide the ride.
Yeah, this is Donna. I would just add that it's not just the new view, but this is the actual change in regulation. So the definition for common wheelchair is no longer there, and the regulations now say that if your vehicle has the capacity to board that person and their mobility device, then you should transport them.
All right. Now, Christian, I have one for you. Now, if the lift is broken, how long does a passenger who needs it have to wait for another bus before they're provided with a private ride? How long does a transit agency have to repair non-functioning accessibility equipment?
All right. Thanks, Ken. I love this question. Well, the answer to it involves something we like to call the 30-minute rule. This rule is intended to address the issue of broken lift equipment or ramp equipment on the vehicle. So say, for instance, you pull up to a stop, and there's an individual using a mobility device, and he's waiting to board, and he requires the use of the lift. And it unfortunately doesn't deploy or gets stuck. Something of that nature happens where it's basically inoperable, and that individual and their mobility device cannot board the vehicle. In that case, that's when the 30-minute rule kicks in. That means that if there's another vehicle coming or another bus coming within the next 30 minutes, meaning that the next scheduled arrival is 30 minutes or less, then the individual can wait for that vehicle to arrive, and they would just essentially be boarding the next bus. However, if it's going to be more than 30 minutes away, so the schedule says it's going to be another 45 minutes to an hour or something like that, in that case, then the operator, the bus operator, has to call into their supervisor and arrange for an alternative mode of transportation. What that alternative mode is can be established under your local policy. Some agencies like to just dispatch a paratransit vehicle. You know, you might be a supervisor going out there in an accessible van and picking up the individual to get them to their destination. Sort of what that alternative mode is completely up to the agency. The regulations just say that if the individual would have to wait more than 30 minutes, a ride has to be provided. to answer the second part of that question regarding inoperable equipment, when it is discovered that a lift or a ramp are broken on the bus, and individuals who require the use of those accessibility features wouldn't be able to ride, that the agency should take the vehicle out of service before the beginning of the vehicle's next service day, and then ensure that the lift is repaired before the vehicle then returns to service. Say you your agency operates in an area where you don't have a spare vehicle available to take the place of the inoperable one, so that, what that means is if you would drastically reduce the transportation service available and not be able to meet your schedules or something like that, then you can keep the vehicle with the broken lift in service for no more than 5 days if your transit agency serves an area of 50,000 people or fewer, or 3 days if you're serving an area of over 50,000 in population. In either case, the count starts from the day on which the lift is discovered to be inoperable. All right. And now,
Our next question for Julie?
Yes, our next question is, sorry about that. Next question is for Julie. Julie, we've got a passenger whose large wheelchair is often low on power. They ask our driver to help push them into the vehicle because the chair doesn't have the power to do it itself. We fear this is a risk to the well-being of the operator. What's our responsibility?
Another good question. The ADA regulations do require that drivers assist passengers with disabilities in using accessibility equipment such as the ramps on the buses, the lifts, and security equipment. It does not, however, specifically require drivers to push or manually operate a power wheelchair or a motorized wheelchair. So as many know, these wheelchairs are often very large and heavy. There can be a risk of injury for the driver, possibly damage to the wheelchair if it's operated in a way that's not safe. But having said that, through no fault of the passenger, batteries to wheelchairs do die unexpectedly, and wheelchairs also could experience electrical difficulty, which might cause issues in movement. So to address this question, while it's not required, it is considered good customer service for a driver to assist the passenger experiencing this type of issue. So passengers should not, however, expect that this type of assistance happens on a regular basis, but if it's something that every once in a while someone experiences this kind of an issue, it's not an unreasonable request of the driver, and it would be considered good customer service.
All right, great. Thank you, Julie. And now the next question is for you, Donna. We seem to have a lot of passengers who use wheelchairs traveling on a particular route. On occasion, we have 2 chairs already on board when we approach, and another one's waiting. What do we do? What do we tell that to the person who is waiting? And what if they've been waiting through several buses?
All right. This question gives me the opportunity to remind everyone that the ADA is not a specialized service, but it is about providing equal access to the same service that everyone else out there has to use. So when a bus or train is crowded and it has no more room to board passengers, then the people waiting at the stop or station who are unable to board are left waiting on the next bus or train to arrive. This holds true for passengers with disabilities as well. So if both of the wheelchair securement places are full on a particular bus so that they no longer have the capacity to board another person using a wheelchair, then the person waits for the next bus to come along that they're able to board. And so it's just the same thing that applies to any passenger out there using the bus. Now, what we recommend, though, as good practice is that the operator should stop the vehicle, inform the passenger waiting at the stop or station that that both of the wheelchair securement slots are full, and that they need to wait on the next bus or train. And if they happen to have information about when that next vehicle is coming along, then to provide that would be a good practice as well. Another thing that some systems will do is they'll provide tripper buses in situations when they know that there's overcrowding on a particular route, there's a really high demand, and that this issue of leaving people waiting at the stop is something that happens on a fairly regular basis. Maybe it's just during a certain time of day on a certain route, maybe it's going to a university somewhere, and so early in the morning there's a high demand for bus service in this area, and maybe there's a high demand for bus service and also the spots for people who use wheelchairs. So if they know that if this is a known situation, they can provide a bus that follows along behind the first bus for this express purpose of just picking up the overflow folks. That's one way to do it. Another way that some transit agencies will handle this is that they have an out-of-service bus that will be waiting nearby. So it's not necessarily following that first bus, but it's close by, so that if there is a lot of crowding and they're leaving people at the stop, the operator can let dispatch know, and then they can put this out-of-service bus that's nearby on the trip to help pick up the overflow folks. So those are just some good practice ways to resolve that situation.
Thanks, Donna. That was great information. I got to change, I guess, let's change gears, let's say that. And this one's for Christian. If a passenger using a wheelchair is seeking to ride a commuter rail line, but the station they will be traveling on is older and does not have a platform, how can that individual access the rail vehicle?
Well, so in the 2011 DOT final rule on transportation for individuals with disabilities at intercity commuter and high-speed rail platforms, there were some really crucial changes that especially impact the experience of travelers who use wheelchairs. These rail station requirements apply to new or altered commuter intercity and high-speed rail platforms. So basically that means that no retrofitting is required. You don't have to go through and tear out all your stations and start all over. But what it does mean is that where you don't have where you have track that is shared with freight. So basically, if only passenger service is passing through a station, then full-length level entry boarding is required. And where track through station is shared with freight, which is quite often the case, a passenger railroad must meet the following standards. Basically, they need to make sure that passengers with disabilities, and that includes passengers using wheelchairs, can access each accessible train car that other passengers can access. If that rail provider cannot provide full-length level entry boarding at that particular station, then it is responsible to still meet the performance standard through a number of other methods. And these are the use of car-borne lifts, which is basically a lift that comes straight out of the vehicle itself and is able to lift a passenger up into the vehicle. Or it can use a station-based lift, and that can be a portable lift. It doesn't have to be fixed to the platform next to where the train arrives. It can be moved over to meet the train. Or it can use a mini-high platform, and that's if you're kind of have multiple passengers that need to board at different parts of the train, you could use the mini-high platform. And the railroad must come up with a plan to present to the FTA or the FRA, which is the Federal Railroad Administration, explaining how it's what method it's chosen to meet those performance standards. And then FTA or FRA would evaluate the proposed plan. They could approve it, they could disapprove it, they could modify it. But basically, if that railroad chooses to use the station-based lift or the mini-high platform instead of having the car-borne lift, it would have to submit a comparison to that approach. Basically, that just means that they're having to explain why they would make that choice over having a vehicle that has a lift built in, similar to a fixed route bus, for example. And you know that explanation has to explain the service quality to persons with disabilities. And then basically that's just all demonstrating that the railroad's done its due diligence in considering how to serve its customers with disabilities. And basically the bottom line is that if you're traveling using a passenger rail line in the United States and you're using a mobility device, that there are a number of fairly new regulations in place to ensure that you can access any train car that your fellow passengers can.
Very good. And that's very good to know. And as a regular commuter rail user, it's interesting to kind of watch the process and what is being done on commuter rail. Now I've got some interesting questions on service animals. And Christian, I got one for you. Do service animals have behavior requirements?
Thanks, Ken. The very short answer is yes. Yes, they do. Basically, to elaborate on that, service animals must be under the control of their handler at all times. So if an issue occurs, then the vehicle operator would first ask the customer to address their animal's behavior. We like to remind individuals that service animals are an extension of the traveler, meaning that whatever local policies on passenger behavior exist, they also apply to service animal behavior as well. So if, for instance, let's say an agency has a policy that an overly disruptive passenger can be asked to exit the vehicle, then if a service animal is being overly disruptive, like running around the vehicle, for example, and bothering other passengers, then the operator could ask the handler to get the service animal under control. If the handler, the individual traveling with the service animal, is unable to do so, then at that time the operator could follow the local policy for disruptive behavior that any passenger might be exhibiting. So in this case, the operator could ask the handler and the service animal to exit the vehicle. On that particular question of cleaning up a mess that's been caused by a service animal, it's the same basic rule applying here. So whatever your local policy on passenger behavior is would also apply to the animal. So a good way to think about this is whether your agency would require or charge someone who is, say, for instance, spilled their coffee in the morning. Would you charge that individual for whatever the cost of cleaning is? If the answer is yes, then you could possibly charge someone whose service animal has made a mess. If your answer is no, and you just kind of consider that a normal part of doing business, and you would incur the cost, the agency incurs the cost of cleaning, then that answer also applies to the individual whose service animal made a mess. All right, Julie, I've got a question for you now. This guy shows up on our bus with 2 dogs and a bird, claiming that they are our service animals. That's 3 animals altogether. So is that allowed?
Thanks, Christian. Well, the ADA is silent on the topic of number of service animals. So there's nothing that specifically is written that says, one person has a maximum of 1 animal, 2 animals. So while it does provide for the right for individuals with disabilities to choose to use service animals to enhance personal mobility or to enhance their ability to live independently, it doesn't put any number. It also doesn't put any cap on the number of animals that one person might use. So the short answer to this question is that yes, it's absolutely allowed. There could be somebody boarding a bus, boarding a paratransit vehicle with more than 1 service animal. So there's a couple of quick reasons that I'll give for this. The first is that there might be multiple reasons why someone would have more than 1 service animal. So, for example, one person might have 2 service dogs. One could be trained for wayfinding purposes to help them get from point A to point B, and at the same time maybe have another animal that would be trained to help them. Let's say they suffer from a seizure disorder, and that animal is trained to alert them to an oncoming episode. So that could be one example of somebody traveling with 2 animals, just for 2 different purposes. Also, the working life of a service animal, similar to us human beings, is not its entire life. So at some point, service animals do retire. They live out their golden years, and handlers have to train a new animal. So there could be some overlap where somebody is out boarding a bus with their dog who might be getting ready to head into retirement and also training a new service animal. So again, there's really nothing that says anything about the number or the cap of service animals, but there are a couple of reasons why somebody might be boarding, and those are just two of the more common ones that come to our mind.
All right. Well, thank you. Donna, would you mind taking the next one?
Sure.
It's become apparent to our operators that several people are using the same service dog, swapping off days or times that each use the dog when they go out in the community. Is this really a service animal, and can they do that?
We've gotten this question a number of times from a number of different places over the last several months, which is one of the reasons we wanted to include it here. So the definition of a service animal in the DOT regulations, it starts out saying service animal means any guide dog, signal dog, or other animal individually trained to work or perform tasks for an individual with a disability. This seems to indicate then that the expectation is that a single animal is trained to work or perform tasks for a single individual person. It's also not typical for a service dog to be trained to perform tasks for more than one person. The nature of training a service animal to assist a person with a disability is very much dependent upon the bond that is formed between the handler and the animal. And it takes kind of general performance and makes it very specific to meet the needs of that particular person. So given this, it's really not very likely that a dog would be a service animal to more than one person. And Christian, I think we missed one back here about small dogs.
Yes, we had a slide that was out of order, so that next one is for Ken. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we come across a young lady with a small dog that fits in her lap on her back, in her bag on her lap rather. She claims that this is a service animal. Can it really be? Is it true that an operator can ask a person with a service animal what specific task that animal performs?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You can ask that question. You can ask, basically, if someone's getting on with an animal, you can say, is it a service animal? And the person may say yes, but you're still not sure. You can also ask, what task does the animal perform? And the person should be able to tell you what task the animal performs. These are the only questions you can ask, so you don't want to be asking questions about the person's disability, or you can't say, is the animal certified, or do you have papers for the animal, and you don't want ask to demonstrate the service that the animal performs. So you just have to take the word of the individual that the animal is a service animal. And sometimes animals are used for things like seizure alerts or other ways of alerting people about different kinds of disability-related issues, or they can be an animal that do things like retrieve items. I've even seen dogs that retrieve items out of backpacks or picking up things when they're dropped. So you just have to ask what tasks animals perform, and then go with what the person says. That's about all you can do.
All right. Thank you, Ken. And at this time, we've got a couple of general ADA questions that we'd like to answer. And this one is for Ken as well. Ken, what are the requirements for Braille on bus stop signs?
And yeah, that's an interesting question, and it's interesting to really have it now, because I think in the last couple of months I've gotten several people asking about Braille requirements on bus stops, and people really are going through the phase of they're updating their bus stops, and they're looking at how can we make them more accessible. And so we get this question about Braille, and really there is no requirement that Braille must be provided. But if you do provide Braille, then the information must meet certain standards and as defined in the ADA standards for transportation facilities. And if you're looking at that would be Chapter 7. But the Braille information should be placed uniformly on the bus stop pole, but not on the traffic sign. That's probably for some obvious reasons. And also for ease of mounting, Braille characters are generally just punched into the metal plate, which has a smooth finish and finished edges, because you got to think about the metal plate should not be cutting people, and you know, it should be easy to find, but should not have sharp edges. And always ensure Braille dots are raised to the touch. There have been some installations where there is Braille, it looks pretty good, but they're not raised in a way that they can be really usable for the Braille reader. And if possible, whenever you do plan Braille placements and you do placements, have a person who reads Braille confirm that the Braille labeling is correct and that it's really usable. When you do Braille, there's different materials that have been tried and used, embossed labels, polymers meaning plastics, you know, sort of a stamped or molded plastic, chemically welded raster beads that go onto the metal plate, and cast metal. And there's various prices and different things depending on what you use. One thing we like to tell people too, that if whatever you get made, ensure that there's no additional costs on the transcribing of your Braille information. That the price that you get on putting together the Braille sign is included in price. And finally, keep in mind that Braille signs sometimes have been mounted backwards or installed in the wrong place. Braille manufacturers, in most cases, ship the Braille sign with a label to clarify the information on the sign and how it should be positioned. And then finally, you want to keep in mind that tactile raised letter information should also be considered in any installation where you may have Braille information, because there are people who are blind, who have low vision, can benefit from the raised letters and are not Braille readers.
I would just add to that, Ken, that was a really thorough explanation of Braille signage. And while it's not required at bus stops, a lot of places now are looking at how can they make their bus stops more accessible so that people can find them and use them and know where they are. And so we're getting these questions about, so how do I do it? We know we don't have to have it there, but we want it there, so how do we do it? And we're really happy that people are looking at that. And then just an interesting story about Braille being mounted in the wrong places. I took a cruise once, and you know how you have kind of this middle, each floor often has a middle section that's public areas where there may be restrooms or restaurants, that kind of thing, and then you have the off either side you have the rooms where the guest rooms. And so on this particular ship, they had the Braille signs opposite for the rooms. So the ones that were on the right side had the signs that were meant for the rooms on the left side, and the rooms on the left side had the signs meant for the rooms on the right side, and I thought that was quite entertaining. But obviously it was a matter of they got the signs and they didn't have anybody check them to see where they went. So it's always good to check.
All right, now I'd like to ask Julie a question. What is the responsibility of the transit agency to make bus stops accessible, specifically with regards to weather conditions such as this winter with snow and ice?
Thanks, Ken. Well, since bus stops are located on public rights-of-way or on private property, transit agencies might not have jurisdiction to implement certain accessibility improvements, but it can be in the best interest, and it is, of the transit agency to work with its community on necessary improvements. So speaking to general accessibility for a moment, your bus stop advertises an image of your transit agency and the service that you provide. So poorly maintained or inaccessible, unsafe bus stops convey naturally to the public a poor image of the agency and probably discourage use for certain people. So if a bus stop is indeed owned by a transit agency, then accessibility accessibility is their responsibility. So we'll start with just saying, it really kind of depends on where the stop is located, who owns it, and there are a number of minimum ADA bus stop accessibility requirements that basically relate to bus stop pad placement, measurements, route and timetable information, accessible path to the bus stop, the transit signage. But with regard to the impact of weather, such as snow and ice, and I know a lot of us around the country have seen quite a bit of it this year, there's a huge impact to bus stop accessibility when it comes to snow and ice. And I'll start by saying that the lack of ability to remove snow at bus stops and on walkways is one of the major barriers affecting people of all abilities in their travel. So all of us to some degree have difficulty when you add the snow factor and the ice factor in. So for people with disabilities, this makes it even more especially dangerous. And when you think about all of the pathways to make things accessible, to travel independently, you throw in snow and ice, and there's a real danger there. So Title II of the ADA addresses the issue of sidewalk maintenance. It requires state and local governments and public facilities to maintain their facilities and equipment that are necessary to be accessible for people with disabilities, and really makes it calls for it to be in working condition. So sidewalks and pathways, especially those leading to transportation, aren't considered under this title as a public facility. So in many cities, there are snow removal policies for businesses and government buildings that give, for example, a store owner a certain deadline for clearing snow from sidewalks and pathways around their business. So it's a good idea for transit agencies to think about this in this manner and maybe adopt a similar procedure. That would definitely be considered a best practice for access to transportation and accessibility. So one of the other things I'll address for a moment here, we've seen a lot on the East Coast this year of this wet and heavy snow. In many communities, when it snows, bus stops and curb cuts become a dumping ground for snow from the roads, and many of you on this webinar today are probably very well versed in that. So, but this is especially true with wet and heavy snow. And when there's particularly heavy snow, it's customary that a transit agency's first focus for clearing this is to remove the snow from subway stations, some of the most popular bus stops first. And a lot of agencies in the country have policies where they will identify essential bus stops, essential subway stations, train stations, and take care of those first. And then a lot of times they're the most popular route as well. So they'll take care of them first and then have processes in place where a customer can alert an agency to an untroubled stop that they might not have gotten to yet. So if there is a person out there that is trying to access a bus stop and snow in general, but particularly wet and heavy snow, is blocking a pathway, blocking the whole stop itself, it's a really good idea to call in and indicate that you are a person with a disability, to disclose that, and that you really need access to the bus service. So it can take an average of 1 to 3 days for an agency to remove snow from even the most essential routes, so that is something to keep in mind. But certainly calling in, telling somebody why you need to have the bus stop be accessible if it hasn't been plowed yet or cleared, that's a good plan to have. And from the transit agency perspective, certainly having a plan in place for dealing with snow removal is a great place to start. So, in the field of travel training, we always say to practice your crisis plan in a time of non-crisis, and I think that holds true for snow removal here as well. So if it's not something that your agency has a plan for dealing with, or maybe it's something that doesn't affect you very often, you get very limited amount of snow, just coming up with a plan for how you would deal with snow removal from bus stops and walkways, and with an emphasis on getting people to the point where they can continue to access your service as best they can when we have these weather events, specifically the wet and heavy snow. That's a great place to start.
All right, that's especially good to know this winter, and we're all really hoping for spring to arrive soon. The next question is for Donna. If the automatic announcement system is not working or is inaudible, what must the driver do? If the person with no apparent disability asks an operator to call out a specific bus stop en route, what's the operator's responsibility to comply?
So the ADA requires that stop announcements be made on fixed route systems in the following ways. So first of all, at all transfer points. So anytime there's a point at which you can exit one vehicle and transfer to another bus or to the train system or to a ferry system, whatever, those stops should be called. The second is at other major intersections and destination points. So these would be major places along the route. Maybe you can't transfer at these points, but they're of particular interest. So, for instance, if you have a National League football team or baseball team, they have stadiums in your area, that would be a common destination point, and those stops should be announced as well. Third, at enough intervals along the route to allow a person with disability to stay oriented. This one is a little squishy, I like to say, because it's left up to the local provider to determine what this means exactly. What is enough intervals along the way to keep a person oriented? But basically what we're getting at here is that if there are, let's just say, 10 or 12 stops between either a transfer point or major destination points, and in between there you've got 10 or 12 stops along the way, it can be very difficult to keep up with if you need that 6th stop or the 8th stop along that route, it can be difficult to keep up with when that's coming about. So kind of announcing every few stops just to make sure that a person stays oriented along their route. And this can be a particular concern in rural areas where there's a much longer distance between stops. And then finally, they're required to call out stops if it's specifically requested by a person with a disability. So even though your destination stop may not be a major stop, it may not be a transfer point, but still if you say, please let me know when we get to 3rd Street, they should call that stop out for you. So these announcements can be made either by an automated system or by the operator. The ADA does not specify that, but they must be clear and they must be audible. If a transit agency typically uses an automated system to make stop announcements and for whatever reason it's not working, it's just like any other piece of equipment on the bus, sometimes it just fails and it's not going to work, then the operator is required to call out the stops in place of the automated system. They have to manually call out the stops. So while the ADA the ADA requirements do indicate that stop request made by a rider with a disability should be called out, it's really difficult sometimes, or it's not always possible, to determine if a person has a disability. So since the operator is not allowed to ask questions about do you have a disability, what we suggest is it's good practice that if anyone gets on the bus and asks that a particular stop be called, that you just go ahead and do it. That's the quickest, the easiest, and the most customer-friendly way to handle the situation.
All right. Excellent information. And we also like to kind of round out our session with some questions on customer service. Christian, can you take this one?
Sure.
On our system, riders sometimes miss stops because they become disoriented or unable to see them. When this occurs, riders often become anxious and confused. What should a bus operator do to help in this situation?
Thanks, Ken. Well, the ADA itself does not set forth any kind of specific responsibility that the transit agency has to take any sort of special action that would ensure a passenger on the fixed route can arrive at their destination. There's kind of an expectation that there's some sort of risk or some level of risk involved when you're taking a public transportation trip, and that's a dignity of risk that everyone is equally allowed. Both riders with disabilities also assume that risk. However, that being said, even though it's not necessarily an ADA issue, it's certainly a point of good customer service that should definitely be considered. So say you're a transit operator and you notice that there's a passenger on your board that has missed his stop. Maybe you know that person usually gets off the bus at a specific location. Well, in this case, you might be able to ask if hey, were you going to a different location today or a different stop? And if the person says, oh yeah, you're right, I totally missed it. Then you could just do something to help them out. Maybe it could be something like calling dispatch, asking your supervisor what they think the best course of action would be, and that might include any number of possibilities, like having someone pick up the passenger and provide them a ride to their final destination if you really want to provide kind of top-notch service, or you could just provide some kind of more basic level of assistance. So, for instance, saying, oh, that there's a bus traveling in the opposite direction. We're coming up to a point where it's going to be pretty safe to cross the street. Why don't I drop you off there, and then you can give that individual instructions on how to cross and get on the right bus. Really, any number of ways like that can just really help that individual who's missed their stop. One other thing that I would just like to mention is that this might also be a case for sort of reasonable accommodations. So say, for instance, a lot of transit agencies have a policy on idle ridership. Basically, that means that they don't want passengers to get on, pay fare once, and then just ride the bus all day. So they have a policy saying that you cannot stay on the bus for longer than one full trip. In this case, if you feel that it'd be unsafe for the passenger to get out and catch the bus going the opposite way, you could provide a reasonable accommodation to that policy and recommend that the individual stays on the bus, reaches the end of the line, and waits till the next run so that they can just get back to their original destination. Again, that would just be a great way to provide good customer service to a passenger with a disability and help ensure that their trip that they're taking independently and successfully. Great. Well, now we've got another one here for you, Ken. Okay. We have a passenger who's deaf aboard our bus and hand the driver a note with the stop to which she would like to travel. How can we signal to the passenger when her stop is reached?
All right. Well, let's see. The first thing you really want to note is that the passenger here is deaf, so they might not be able to hear, and they might not be able to hear the stop announcement made by the automated system on the bus. It could be possible that the person can't hear any sound at all. So there must be something visual done to indicate to the person that this is their stop. The person may, for example, present the driver with a card or note to say that they would like to be notified about the bus stopping at a certain place, and the driver could keep the note or card in front of them. Some driver's consoles have areas where you can actually sit and clip something like a card in the driver's area to remind them, and then they would remind the person in a visual way. Sometimes it's waving the card to the person, sometimes it's waving their arm, showing that that's your stop, and there's different ways. And that is sort of just the way that you can notify that individual. But just always keep in mind that if a person really is deaf, there must be some kind of nonverbal or non-audible way of communicating about the stop. And have to kind of work with each individual to find out which way is the best way to communicate. So some of these different ways and practices could be practiced now in driver's trainings and working with your deaf community, and all those sorts of things could be helpful.
And our last planned question for today is for Donna. The training provided to our operators is pretty clear on serving customers who are blind and serving customers who are deaf. But what can we do to be better prepared to serve customers who are deafblind?
All right, so the primary consideration here is for effective communication. The rider who is deafblind typically has techniques for communicating whatever it is that they need you to know to the operator. So for one example, the customer may have some written instructions on a card, or it may be, these days, it may be displayed on a device like a smartphone or a tablet. So they have something prepared in advance, and they are going to show it to the operator. Or they may be able to communicate verbally. So the person may be deaf-blind, so they can't hear or see you, but they may be able to speak and say what it is that they need to tell you, ask for help, or tell you where their stop is, that sort of thing. So one example would be that the person might hand an operator a card that reads something like this. It may say, please notify me when we reach Martin Luther King Boulevard and 5th Street by tapping me on the arm. I'm deaf-blind. Please tap my arm twice if you understand. So you have to take into consideration here that this person is stepping onto the bus. They are holding out a card with print information on it, expecting that the operator is going to look at it. And the only way that they know that you've actually looked at it and you've read it and you understand it is if you give them some kind of signal. So it does no good to nod your head or wave at them or say got it, anything like that. And so what they've asked you is that you tap them on the arm to indicate that you've read and understood what it is that they want. Then this person goes and sits down and then waits for you to come and tap them on the arm again when they've reached their stop. A rider who is deafblind may also want assistance in finding an open seat on the bus. It's recommended that the operator offer his or her arm to the person who needs to find the seat, lead them to a place where they can sit down, put their hand on the back of the seat, so that lets the person know this is the seat that's open to you, and gets them oriented to where they need to turn around and sit down. Please note that it is not appropriate to push or pull a person into the direction that you want them to go, or to turn them around by their shoulders and shove them down in a seat. Those kinds of things are a pretty inappropriate way to handle that situation. What you want to do is to provide the assistance that's needed so that the person knows where the seat is, and then that person can turn around and get themselves in the seat specifically. If you're having some difficult situations with a frequent rider who is deaf-blind and needing to try to work out something that's going to make it a quick and easy way to provide the assistance that's needed, you might consider having the transit agency to bring in an interpreter to ask that rider specifically what's the best way to provide assistance to them, so that you can get that worked out, and then it'll be easier on a day-to-day basis to provide good service, good transit service to that individual.
All right. Thank you, Donna, and thank you also, Julie and Ken. That concludes our scripted portion for today, and we've got about 15 minutes left. So we'd like to open up the phone lines and the chat window to your questions for anything that we didn't address. So please feel free to either type your questions into the chat window, or you can call in via phone. Press star and then 1 on your touch-tone phone, and you'll be patched into our question queue. So we'll give a moment here for people to call in. In the meantime, people have been submitting some great questions via the chat box during the session. So here's one on pickup windows that we did not address, so I'll put it out here for the group. This question is coming from Bruce, and he's asking, for paratransit, what are the ADA requirements for the pickup window when the passenger wants a specific pickup time? And what are the requirements for pickup when the passenger wants a specific drop-off time?
This is Donna. I don't know that I'm going to be able to hit all the points that you want here. Again, this is a pretty complex piece of the regulation. But basically, when you call in to schedule a ride via paratransit, the process is to negotiate the pickup time that you want, either for your outbound trip or your return trip. And often what is asked is, when do you need to be there? So rather than to say, I want you to pick me up at 7:30, what you may need to say is, I need to be there at 8 o'clock. And then they start to, based on their scheduling software, to negotiate what would be the best time for them to pick you up in order for you to make sure that you're there at 8 o'clock. Same thing for the return trip in the afternoon. If you need to, let's say you're getting picked up from work, you get off work at 4:30. What you need to say is, I need to be picked up and I can't be picked up any earlier than 4:30. And then start to negotiate. And again, it is a negotiation, should be a negotiation back and forth between the rider and the folks doing the scheduling to agree on what would be a reasonable pickup time to make sure that you get to where you need to go when you need to be there. Did that cover that one?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
And we do have a number of people calling in on the phone, so Stephanie, if you could patch through the first question, please.
Your first question comes from the line of Ross.
Hello.
Okay.
My question is ADA paratransit related, and I actually have a rider who says he has post-traumatic stress disorder, and because of this, he can get anxiety very unexpectedly, including getting his anxiety in less than 1 hour before the trip is scheduled to depart. And we have a 2-hour minimum cancellation policy. So as a result, this rider has accumulated about 17 no-shows and 2 late cancellations in the last month. So clearly in violation of our policy. So it's having a very negative impact upon our operational capacity. And he's saying because of the disability, he's not able to predict and comply with our policy. I want to get your feedback on that.
Again, this is Donna. You certainly have the right to establish a policy that is going to make it possible for you to conduct the trips and meet the demand that you have for your transit agency. So establishing a policy, a reasonable policy with regard to no-shows and late cancellations is absolutely an essential piece of making your operation run smoothly. It sounds to me like in this particular situation you have made some effort to make some allowance for the fact that this person's conditions create a situation in which they're going to have more no-shows than would be typical. What I would suggest, again, the ADA is pretty silent in terms of how much you're required to stretch the policy that you establish. So obviously it allows you to establish a policy. It needs to be reasonable. It needs to be something that allows a person to do better later, that kind of thing. But in this particular situation, it sounds like you have some fairly extreme circumstances, and so what I think we would recommend here at Project Action is that you meet with the individual, perhaps in a face-to-face meeting if possible. You discuss what the issues are, the impact of the no-shows on that he's creating on your service, and therefore how you're able to respond to other people within your service area, and see if you can come up with some kind of agreement about what would be a workable policy in this situation. If you do that and there continues to be violations on what the two of you agreed would be reasonable and workable, then you just have to follow through with whatever your policy says happens in those types of situations. But certainly we would recommend that you take into consideration that this is a disability condition that can have an impact on how a person is able to handle their world and your transportation service, and see if there's some kind of agreement that you can come up with that individual specifically that's going to make it possible for them to get some of the trips they need and for you to continue to operate a service that meets the needs of everybody else. So that's kind of not a direct answer on that, but certainly you have the right to establish a policy, and you have the right to follow through fairly on that policy so that you can provide the service that's needed for everyone.
And you're making you're making a reasonable effort to try to work it out with the individual, so you're not just saying our policy is this, absolutely, you've missed all this time, you can't write, but you're going to work through some kind of plan and inform that individual that here's the plan and here's what we got to work with, so that they're informed as to what missing these trips could do to their ability to get future rides. So you're just not kind of leaving them hanging out, but you're really making a reasonable effort to work with them. And
it may be that, this is Donna again, it may be that through this kind of a discussion that the person who is having all of the late shows and cancellations may be able to figure out some way to maybe make an earlier determination on the day of travel as to whether or not they'll be able to make that trip, in fact, that sort of thing. So, it's worth just kind of exploring and giving the person the opportunity to help come up with some answers, and rather than having it devolve into a situation of, he says A, we did B, then here's the result. So getting some good open lines of communication might help that better. And we're more than happy to talk with you directly about it if you want to call us.
Thanks again, Donna. We'll give it a try.
Right.
All right. Stephanie, can we have our next question from the phone line, please?
Your next question comes from Jacqueline.
This is Jacqueline Henry Rodriguez from Connecticut DOT. This is really not a question. Well, I guess it is, but I was not able to log on to the webinar, so I just listened to the webinar over the phone line, which was pretty good, and I had the printouts to help me follow along. There's a session evaluation. Will I be able to take that?
Yes. Jacqueline, to answer your question, if you're a registered participant, you'll be receiving it via email following the webinar. And I will also make a note of your name, and we'll make sure to get it to you.
Okay. Thank you.
If you do not get an email with the evaluation link, so let's just say somebody else in your agency signs you up, so it doesn't come to you directly. If you have for any reason have trouble finding it, just drop us an email at webinars@easterseals.com and we'll send it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Your next question comes from the line of Vincent.
Go ahead, Vincent.
This is good afternoon. This is a question about paratransit again. A reference to reservations. ADA guidelines is that we have in a discussion where we say that a person can make a reservation a day ahead or 24 hours ahead. And what we're finding is people calling at 4:45, making an appointment for tomorrow morning, or is it 24 hours? That's
Yeah, it's previous day. So if a person wants to travel on Tuesday, they can call up till the closing time on Monday to schedule a trip on Tuesday.
And it's really kind of your close. Generally, it's the close of time of business whenever your reservation sort of is operating. But it may be less than 24 hours.
okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Your next question comes from Bren.
Hi. My question relates to the definition of a mobility device, such as carts that sometimes people call mobility devices, but specifically related to electric bikes. We have racks on the front of our buses for bicycles, but the electric bikes may be too heavy for the racks. If a person claims that an electric bicycle is their mobility device, are we required to allow them to bring it inside the bus and put it in the wheelchair tie-down area? And does the driver have to help the person carry it on?
Yeah, I mean, these are kind of non-standard mobility devices, and the whole mobility device recognizes sort of standard mobility devices. It's kind of a local policy as to what really is. I mean, I can't picture what electric bike is, but anybody?
I'm not sure of that as a device either. But however, I think the closest guidance that we have ever seen on something like this would be the same thing as people who are using Segways as mobility devices. And the FTA has, asked that if you can to accommodate a person who is using a Segway as a mobility device, and therefore they could bring it onto the bus, blah, blah, blah. With your electric bike, I think I would, again, just as technical assistance, recommend that you consider allowing the person to bring it onto the bus. However, I don't know what you mean when you say does the operator has to help. If you mean like pick it up and get it into the right place. Again, it's kind of whatever reasonable assistance you might provide a person using a standard mobility device. You would not expect the operator to, pick up a wheelchair or a scooter or anything like that. So it would kind of be up to the person to be able to control and maneuver their own device as needed. And then, if the operator could provide some reasonable assistance, like maybe putting a hand on it to keep it from falling over while it gets into the right place, that kind of thing, maybe, something along those lines. But this is outside of anything that the ADA currently requires in terms of mobility devices, and without being really sure what an electric bike is, I don't know that we can be a whole lot more specific.
So do these things have 2 wheels or 3 wheels? I just can't picture an electric bike.
They just have a small motor on them. So the person doesn't have to pedal. They might pedal to get it started, but then the motor makes it go forward. So it's heavier.
Okay.
And it's more awkward than a regular bike. Good. Well, good. Well, thank you. Unfortunately, I have to run now for another meeting, but thank you very much.
Sure.
Your next question comes from Ken.
Go ahead, Ken.
This is Ken in Atlanta.
Yep.
Oh, okay. My question is about missed trips or trips that have been abandoned. So my question is that an agency has set a negotiated time has been arranged, say it's 8 o'clock, and to pick you up, it doesn't pick you up within that hour. Apparently it did not actually have a vehicle to schedule you for that hour, but they were hoping that it would be able to fill in, and they haven't picked you up. Is that how does that work with abandoned trips or denials? I guess more of a better question. What's a denial? Even though they haven't said they don't have a trip, it wasn't there to pick you up.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, if a trip has been scheduled and they're to pick you up at 8 o'clock and they have that pickup window that they can provide that says, so therefore they'll pick you up between 7:45 and 8:15, and there is no vehicle that picks you up, it's a missed trip. And so it counts as a missed trip, and it's going to when a transit agency is looking at their own performance or their performance is being audited, then it's going to look at what the number of missed trips and the impact of that with regard to their capacity constraints. So we'll have an impact with regard to that. But yeah, if the trip's been scheduled and you don't get picked up, it's a missed trip. Am I missing something there?
No, yeah, I guess you're right about that. But my concern is, when does it actually? I mean, what makes it a denial? There was no. It seems that there's no intent of actually having that vehicle pick you up at that time because there's a number. When did it become a denial rather than just a missed trip?
So there's no intent of picking. So are you kind of saying they didn't really quite schedule the trip?
That's correct. They didn't really schedule the trip, but they said they're going to pick you up at a particular time. For instance, they may have a particular bus, one bus to pick up 5 people at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, there's some. I'm afraid we're going to have to delve a little deeper. I'm not sure I can answer this one just off the cuff. You stumped us, so let's be the prize for that. And actually, there is when the ADA was amended recently, there was some new a new piece about missed trips and denials, which is not coming to my brain at the moment exactly what it is, so I don't want to misspeak. So please, if you would contact us directly and let us answer that for you directly, we'd be happy to do that. We're happy to kind of delve into the details and help find an answer.
And what we'd like to do is kind of look at sort of exactly the situation, so be pretty descriptive as to what's going on. So why was the trip scheduled, but it really wasn't? But there's all these kind of shady areas there. We'd like to kind of see what's going on. So
yeah, so we'll need to get a little more in depth on that one, and we'd like to be challenged. So we're very happy to answer that. It is a little after 3:30. Is it 3:30?
Yes, it is. I'm showing the end of our session time. We do have a few more individuals on the phone queue. We're more than happy to stay and answer your questions if you have a little bit of time to hang out. For everyone who does have to jump off the call now, I just want to remind everyone that I'll be emailing out an evaluation to all registered participants following the session. We really appreciate your feedback. It's very helpful to us in shaping our future sessions, and it shouldn't take you more than a few minutes to fill out, so please keep an eye out on your email for that. If we were unable to get to your question today, I did mark down the ones in the chat window that we didn't get to, so we can reach out to you individually with the answers. If you didn't have an opportunity to ask us a question, please give us a call at 800-659-6428, and we'll be happy to speak with you. Again, that's 1-800-659-6428, and that call comes directly to our training team. Also, you can send it in via email to Project Action at easterseals.com. Again, that's Project Action, all one word, at easterseals.com, and we'll be checking that regularly as well. I want to thank Donna, Ken, Julie for that great presentation today. I hope you all learned a lot. And I want to also thank our Better World operator, Stephanie, for, as always, doing a remarkable job on our calls. Also, please watch our website, projectaction.org, and your email for future Easter Seals Project Action events. If you're not signed up for our newsletter, you can do so very easily from our homepage. I want to thank everyone who called in today for your commitment to accessible transportation. Thank you so much for joining us. And that concludes our official session. For anyone who's still on the phone, we'll be happy to take your questions at this time.
So we're going to hang around for a little while longer and try to answer questions off the phone and out of the chat field until it looks like folks are abandoning us, and then we'll stop. So who's next?
Your next question comes from David.
All right, David.
David Edwards. I'm wondering if you could send a transcript of the answers.
Yes, we can. David, if you could email us at webinars@easterseals.com, and if you would like it in hard copy and provide your mailing address, or if you just want an email copy, if you just send that request to webinars@easterseals.com, we'll send it to you as soon as the text perfected transcript is ready.
Yeah, email copy would be great.
Okay, great. So yeah, if you email that request to us so that we have your email address, we'll get that to you as soon as it's ready.
Can I send the email to the email that I got earlier in the day?
Yes, if you reply to the email that you received earlier, that we'll get that as well.
Okay, that'll work great. Thank you for your help.
No problem. Thank you.
Bye.
Your next question comes from Rebecca.
Thank you. I have a gentleman who rides our route system using a motorized wheelchair, and like all of us, he's aging. He does have mild MR, and he has become very agitated towards drivers and passengers when he's trying to board. He's having greater difficulty boarding our buses any longer. What I did was I contacted our local Department of Aging, and they were going to go in and check on him and see how he is and if he needed additional care. I don't know that he has a caseworker or not. What my question to you is, though he has in the past used our paratransit, now that he is deteriorating, can we insist that he use the paratransit system?
You cannot really, I don't know how to answer this. Let me start over again. You cannot tell a person that they must use your paratransit system. What you can say is that there are reasons why they can no longer use your fixed route. And then if he chooses to use paratransit instead, then that's great. It's available to him, and you're able to provide the assistance. However, you need to think about on what grounds you're making that determination. So remove the disability aspect of it and think about, is the disruption that this passenger causing, is it equivalent to the disruption that any other passenger might be denied a ride on the bus? So if you were picking up, I don't know, some rowdy folks outside a bar, what would be the level of disruption that you would tolerate from those folks on your bus? Maybe the way they talk to the operator, or the way they talk to other passengers, or those kinds of things. Is this equivalent to that? What does your policy say about disruptive behavior, and is whatever this person exhibiting equivalent to that? Or have what you don't want to do is say, we know this person, their situation is deteriorating, it's starting to be more difficult. It'd be easier for us if this person would just use paratransit, and therefore that's what we're going to suggest that he do. So it needs to be consistent with whatever your policy is about why you might deny trips to folks. And if that's the case, then you can deny him the trips on the vehicle and then say, however, please understand that paratransit is available to you. We'd love to serve you using the paratransit service, that sort of thing.
And you want to kind of also look at whether the behaviors, are they just really kind of annoying people, really, or are they really, seriously disruptive? So
no longer manipulate the controls as well.
Oh, okay. So it's a manipulating of the controls of the chair.
And then what he's doing is he's yelling at other passengers to help him, and as a matter of fact, it's gotten to the point where he himself can't drive his power chair up the ramp any longer.
Okay. Well, yeah, those start to this would probably be things that would go above and beyond what an operator would be required to do. So for instance, we always advise and when training for operators that you don't take over the controls of a person's power chair. It's up to that individual to be able to operate their own device. Operators are required to provide reasonable assistance. So if standing behind the person to ensure that the chair doesn't tip over while going up a ramp might be reasonable assistance. But actually controlling the chair itself, using its controls to drive it on and off, would probably go beyond what would be considered reasonable assistance. And then certainly if there's any abusive behavior towards other passengers or the operator, in terms of yelling and that kind of stuff, then that would certainly be the type of behavior that would fit within your policy. But be real clear about what your policy is on disruptive behavior, and then document clearly that this has occurred, and then start denying him a trip.
Right, thank you. Your answer is perfect. It is somebody that we do care about. He's been with us for a very long time, and hope to see him transition from fixed to the paratransit, because we want him on board.
Sure, very good.
Thank you very much for your time.
Your next question comes from Dorothy.
Sorry, Dorothy, one moment before I ask your question. I just have to let everyone who's left on the call know that our captioner has to leave us in a minute. So Dorothy will be more than happy to take your question. I just have to let everyone know that we, starting in about a minute, will no longer be able to provide the captioning service. So I apologize for that, but we will be getting a transcript made up of the call. So anything that you miss, we will be able to provide afterwards upon request.
All right, go ahead, Dorothy.
Okay, I have a question for you. Is there a limit with the ADA on the number, it's a paratransit question, of negotiated trips that a client can cancel? And if I may, I'll use an example. We have several clients, but one client in particular, I'll just use that one. For 1 month, we negotiated 105 different trips for them during that 1 month period, 31-day period. They took 21 of those trips. We scheduled and made those. They canceled 82 of them, which is about 78%, somewhere around there, of the trips that we negotiated. Is there any kind of limit? So there were people maybe who could have taken those times, but because they weren't no longer available, I'm just wondering, is there something we can do to help this client?
So they canceled these trips. I'm trying to think of what you mean by cancel. Did they negotiate? Did they cancel like within your policy, cancellation time frame? You know, some people have cancellation. You got to do it by a certain time or 2 hours before. Some people have to say, you know,
some of them, as I said, they canceled 82. Some of them, a majority of them, they did in advance. Within the guidelines. 16 of them they canceled on the same day of service, and a few more they did of the 82 that were at the door, or they no-showed or what have you. So we're trying to. I understand that the client's trying to mix fixed route with paratransit trips, but we also understand that other clients aren't getting perhaps the times or some of the things that we could do for our other passengers. So I didn't know if there was a clear guideline. I couldn't see anything in the ADA book that I have, but it doesn't have all the updates, so I just wondered if there was anything new in that area.
Yeah, I think that you're allowed to establish a policy about a number of cancellations allowed. I mean, you can have so if it's a recurring issue, then you may want to establish some kind of policy within your cancellations that would help to encourage people to be more careful about scheduling trips that they aren't going to take. That's a pretty high number of cancellations there. It's a high number of trips, and then it's a high number of cancellations, and it could certainly cause some problems. We see where it causes problems with scheduling other trips. But I don't know. I'm just going to confess up front here that our trainer and technical assistance person whose strong area is paratransit is out on leave today.
Okay.
So I apologize for not having all of the paratransit questions right off the cuff here ready to go. But I would rather tell you that I need to research it more than to give you an answer that may not be what you need. So, Ken, unless you know?
No, I mean, the only thing I can think of is, it really depends on what your policy is. I mean, how does it fit in? If somebody is a no-show, that, yes, counts as a no-show, but what is your policy on the cancellation? And kind of work with that. And the other question is, trying to find out from the individual as to what their understanding is as to their responsibility for their trips. Maybe they don't understand what your policy is and what room they have as far as if they call and cancel their trip. So, it could be some issue maybe around how they understand the information. The ADA doesn't say exactly, but it does say have a policy in place. And it's got to be a policy that you want to work through that could be fair to individuals, not overly punitive, but also a policy that would be clear to individuals who may cancel trips too much.
So this is Donna, what I want to be sure about is, so I want to do a little research to be sure about it, is whether or not there's anything that would prevent you from being able to say, we only allow X number of cancellations or X percent of trips to be canceled within a month, and if you start to cancel more than that, here's what's going to happen. Okay. But I want to be sure that there's nothing that prevents recommending that you set a policy like that. So again, if you would contact us directly so that we're sure we have your email address or phone number, and we'll be happy to delve into this in more detail.
Well, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll look forward to sending that off to you right away.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
There are no additional questions at this time.
All right. Anything hot in the chat field we need to answer?
Nothing too major in the chat field, and we don't have too many people left in the room, so I think this is a good time to wrap up. I'll just remind everyone who stuck with us that I'll be sending out the survey link soon, and we will have recording of the session available immediately following the event upon request, and a transcript, text-perfected transcript available soon that we'll post online and make available upon request. So thank you again to this great team for such a fantastic job today, and thank you to Stephanie and the Better World team for always doing such a great job providing the audio for our webinars. Thanks everyone. Thanks for your commitment to accessible transportation, and have a great day.